My name is Carla Bennett, and if you'd met me a year ago, you would have thought my life was perfect. A beautiful home just outside the city, a successful career in publishing, a handsome husband named Mark who always seemed attentive, and a younger sister, Lily, who everyone adored. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family you'd see smiling in holiday photos. But behind those smiles, there was a darkness I never imagined would consume everything. I used to think betrayal was something that happened to other people in cheap dramas or whispered gossip. I never believed it could walk right into my living room dressed in a familiar face. But the thing about betrayal is that it rarely comes from enemies. It's almost always the people closest to you. That night, when the truth started to crack through the perfect surface of my life, I was hosting a small dinner. It was supposed to be intimate, just Mark, Lily, and a couple of friends. I remember standing in the kitchen, arranging candles and wiping down the counters for the 10th time, trying to calm the strange, restless feeling gnawing at my chest. Something felt off, but I couldn't name it. When Lily arrived, she looked nervous, her smile too tight. Mark, on the other hand, seemed strangely relaxed, almost relieved. I remember noticing the way their eyes kept meeting across the table, fleeting glances they both tried to hide. But I'd always trusted them so completely that even then I told myself I was imagining things. We sat down to eat. The conversation stumbled and twisted in awkward directions until finally, Lily cleared her throat. "I still hear that sound in my nightmares. I have something to tell you all," she said, her voice shaking slightly. I smiled, encouraging her, believing for one last innocent moment that maybe she'd met someone. Maybe there was good news. But then she looked directly at me. Her lips trembled. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. The words hung in the air like poison. I opened my mouth to congratulate her, to ask who the father was, but the words caught in my throat. Because when I turned to Mark, I saw it. The guilt in his eyes. The way he avoided my gaze, staring down at his untouched plate. And in that moment something inside me shattered. I knew. Without anyone saying it, I knew. The man I had loved for 7 years. My husband. The man who held me at night and promised forever. And my own sister, the girl I had protected our whole lives. They had betrayed me in the cruelest way imaginable. For a few seconds the room blurred, my heart hammering so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I thought I might faint or scream or throw something across the table. But I didn't. Because what they didn't know, what neither of them could have guessed, was that I had a secret too. A secret so heavy it had been suffocating me for months. A secret that, when revealed, would tear apart everything they thought they knew about me. And change everything. That night, after the dinner ended in choking silence and half-finished plates, I locked myself in our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the soft carpet, my mind replaying Lily's words again and again. Mark knocked on the door once, twice, but I stayed silent until he gave up. In that silence, my secret pressed harder against my ribs, begging to be let out. Months ago, before any of this, I had discovered something that changed the way I saw Mark. One ordinary Thursday afternoon, I'd come home early from work, arms full of groceries and heart full of routine. I wasn't suspicious. I wasn't even thinking of Mark. I was thinking about dinner, a meeting the next day, and maybe a glass of wine to unwind. But as I stepped into the house, the air felt wrong, like the echo of laughter that had just ended. I found Mark in his office, quickly closing a folder. Too quickly. I asked him what it was, and he gave me a smile so practiced it almost fooled me. "Work," he'd said, "just boring paperwork." That night, when he fell asleep beside me, I slipped out of bed and opened that folder. Inside, I found documents I was never meant to see. Bank statements, a hidden account in his name only. Transfers so large my stomach twisted into knots. And then worse. An unsigned agreement for a property I knew nothing about, far away from where we lived. It wasn't the money itself that destroyed me, it was what it meant. Mark was planning something behind my back. And he didn't trust me enough to tell me. I didn't confront him that night. I decided to watch, to wait. To see how deep his secrets went before I revealed mine. So while he kissed me goodbye in the mornings and sent me goodnight texts, I hired a private investigator. And what that investigator discovered turned my stomach to ice. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't even the secret property. It was Lily. Pictures of them together in places I'd never been. Moments that looked too intimate, too comfortable. A secret life running parallel to mine. Every smile Mark had given me over the past months felt false. Every I love you replayed in my mind with a bitter edge. And Lily, my baby sister, the girl I had defended since we were kids, when she came home crying because someone had teased her at school, she had taken everything from me. Yet I kept silent. Because my secret was bigger. And I wasn't ready to show my hand. You see, months earlier, before I ever suspected Mark, something else had happened. A doctor's visit that changed my world in a different way. I hadn't told Mark. I hadn't told Lily. No one knew. And as I sat in that dark room after dinner, the weight of it pressed down on me. Their betrayal burned, but my secret still burned hotter. I could destroy them both. But at what cost? I stared at my reflection in the window, seeing a woman I barely recognized. Her eyes tired, her shoulders heavy, her heart broken but not yet beaten. I whispered to the glass as if to remind myself. They think they've won. But they don't know everything. The morning after the dinner felt unreal, as if I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. I moved through the house on autopilot, brushing my teeth, tying my hair, ignoring the quiet sounds of Mark moving around the kitchen. Every glance he gave me was careful, rehearsed, but I couldn't even look him in the eye. I wondered if he thought I was stupid or too soft to see the truth. But what Mark didn't know, what Lily couldn't have imagined, was that I had been carrying my own truth for weeks, pressing it down so far inside me that even I sometimes forgot it was there. It was the only thing that kept me from screaming. The only thing that stopped me from throwing him out that very moment. I had to see Lily. I needed to look her in the eyes and ask why. Why my sister, who had cried on my shoulder through every heartbreak, had chosen to destroy me instead. I texted her to meet me at the park near our mother's old house. It was the place where we'd played as children, a place that had always felt safe, neutral ground. She agreed, though her reply was clipped, nervous. I wondered if she feared what I might say, or if she'd convinced herself that her betrayal was somehow justified. When I saw her walking toward me, stomach still flat, hair pulled back like she always did when she felt guilty, my heart clenched so painfully I thought I might double over. I opened my mouth, but the words stuck. She spoke first, her voice a tremor. "Carla, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." But I saw the hesitation in her eyes, the way she waited for my reaction. As if bracing for a slap. What she didn't know was that the betrayal had already cut deeper than any words ever could. I asked her why, my voice barely above a whisper. Her answer came out in fragments. She felt lonely. Mark understood her, it just happened. I watched her face as she spoke, searching for the sister I knew, the one who used to hold my hand at night when we were children scared of the dark. But all I saw was someone I barely recognized, someone who had chosen her own desires over my love, over our family. I wanted to hate her, to scream at her until my voice gave out. But standing there, I realized my anger wasn't as hot as I'd expected. It was colder, heavier, like grief. Because that's what betrayal truly is. The death of what you believed someone was. And once it's gone, it never returns. Then Lily reached out, her voice breaking. "I know you'll never forgive me, but I had to tell you before it got worse." Her words pierced me, but I said nothing about what I knew. About the hidden account, the property, the months of lies. And still I kept my own secret buried. Because my secret wasn't about them, it was about me. About the life I carried that neither of them knew existed. About the baby growing inside me, Mark's child, conceived before I discovered his betrayal. In that moment, standing in the park that smelled of wet leaves and memories, I realized the cruel symmetry of it all. My sister was pregnant with my husband's child, and I was pregnant too. The difference was, mine had been conceived in love, or what I thought was love. Hers was born from betrayal. And that difference meant everything. Lily cried, tears slipping silently down her face. For a second I almost reached out, almost comforted her like I had so many times before. But my hand froze in the air, falling back to my side. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. Neither did I. But I knew one thing for certain. The moment they discovered my secret, everything would change. And I wasn't sure either of them would survive it. Days passed like a storm cloud hanging low, suffocating every breath I took. I kept my secret locked inside me, a fragile flame flickering beneath the weight of betrayal and impending revelations. Mark acted as if nothing had happened, his smiles hollow and eyes avoiding mine, but the silence between us screamed louder than any argument could. Lily disappeared from my life, ghosting my calls, leaving only messages full of apologies and excuses. But I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. Not when everything felt so broken. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of what would happen if I told the world what I knew. The secret I carried was a lifeline, but also a ticking bomb. I wasn't just pregnant. I was pregnant with a truth that could unravel all of us. Weeks earlier, during a routine checkup, my doctor had discovered something unexpected. I was carrying twins. Twins, yes, but the more impossible part was that they weren't both Mark's. One was his child, but the other belonged to someone else. Someone from my past I had tried to forget. Memories flooded back like waves crashing against a fragile shore. A night I had buried deep inside me. A night where love had been confused with pain, where trust had been broken long before Mark and Lily's betrayal. I hadn't told Mark about the twins. I hadn't told Lily. I hadn't told anyone. Because even as everything fell apart around me, I wasn't ready to face the chaos this secret would unleash. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, imagining a future where everything came crashing down, where my sister's betrayal, Mark's lies, and my own hidden past collided like a catastrophic storm. I wondered if love could survive that kind of devastation. If forgiveness was even possible. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, Mark finally broke the silence. His voice was quiet, desperate, as if he knew the walls were closing in. "Carla, we need to talk." I looked up, tired but resolute. "There's nothing left to say," I whispered. But he shook his head. "Please. I want to make this right." I wanted to believe him, I really did. But trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt with truth. And the truth I was holding back was heavier than any apology he could give. As days turned into weeks, I realized that the secret I held was more than a weapon or a shield. It was a test. A test of who I was, what I could endure, and how much I was willing to fight for myself in the future I wanted to build. My sister had betrayed me, my husband had lied to me, but I was still standing. Stronger than they ever imagined. And when the time came to reveal my secret, to let the truth shake their world as theirs had shaken mine, I knew it would change everything. Not just for them, but for me. Because sometimes the darkest betrayals give birth to the strongest truths. The decision to confront them both wasn't easy. I spent countless nights wrestling with doubt, fear, and anger swirling inside me. How could I reveal my secret and still have any claim to my own life? How could I stand tall when the people I loved had broken the foundation beneath my feet? But I knew hiding forever wasn't an option. I arranged to meet Lily at a small cafe, the kind with soft lighting and quiet corners where difficult conversations could unfold away from prying eyes. When she arrived, I noticed the way she glanced around nervously, as if expecting judgment or fury. And maybe she was right to be afraid. I took a deep breath and began. "Lily, you think you betrayed me with Mark. But you don't know everything. I'm pregnant too." The words hung between us like a fragile thread, trembling with possibility. "Not just with Mark's child. I'm carrying twins. One of them isn't his." Her face paled, eyes widening in shock. "What are you saying?" she whispered. I swallowed hard. "There's more. The other father, he's someone from my past. Someone I thought I'd left behind." I watched her carefully, waiting for her reaction. She stared at me, speechless. The tables had turned, and suddenly the fragile thread between us felt stronger than ever. Not because we'd forgiven, but because secrets had woven a new, complicated bond. Later that day I confronted Mark. His eyes, usually so confident, flickered with fear when I told him. "I know about the money, the hidden accounts, and the lies," I said quietly. "But you need to know about my secret too." His face crumpled in disbelief. "You mean twins? And that one of them isn't mine?" he asked, voice cracking. "Yes," I replied. "And now everything between us changes. We're no longer just partners in love. We're bound by truths that we can't ignore." The coming days were a blur of emotion, legal consultations, and heartache. But through it all I felt a strange clarity. My secret, once a burden, became my power. It was the truth that gave me control over my story, my future, and my healing. I won't pretend the road ahead was easy. Forgiveness felt impossible some days, and trust even harder. But as I stood on the edge of a new chapter, I realized that betrayal, no matter how deep, doesn't have to define who I am. And this secret, the one that changed everything, was the beginning of my freedom. After that confrontation, everything between Mark, Lily, and me shifted in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The air was thick with tension, with unspoken words and shattered trust that seemed impossible to repair. Mark tried to explain himself, pleading for forgiveness, but every apology felt hollow, a patch over a gaping wound. Lily, on the other hand, seemed almost broken, the confident younger sister replaced by someone fragile and remorseful. But amidst all the chaos, my focus turned inward. I started to prepare for the twins' arrival, a bittersweet beacon of hope in the middle of my storm. The doctor's appointments became my anchor, the baby's heartbeat a reminder that life could continue, even when everything else seemed to fall apart. There were nights I cried alone, nights I laughed despite the pain. I wondered what kind of mother I would be, a woman who had been betrayed, lied to, and yet still carried life within her. Would I be strong enough? Would my children ever know the truth about the tangled web that brought them into this world? Slowly I began to rebuild my life on my own terms. I moved out of the house that had become a prison of memories, finding a small apartment where I could breathe and think. I told only a few trusted friends about the pregnancy and the betrayal, carefully guarding my secret from the rest of the world. Mark and Lily faded from my daily life, their presence reduced to occasional texts and phone calls, attempts at reconciliation I wasn't ready to accept. The distance was painful but necessary. I needed space to heal, to find myself again beyond the shadows of their mistakes. And as the months passed, something unexpected happened. The weight of betrayal started to lift, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. I discovered a fierce love growing inside me, not just for the babies but for myself. A love that refused to be crushed by lies or heartbreak. One afternoon, while organizing the nursery, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman staring back at me was different from the one who had sat alone in that dark bedroom months ago. She was scarred, yes, but also radiant. A woman reborn from the ashes of betrayal, ready to face whatever came next. Because secrets can destroy, but they can also heal. And this secret, my secret, was the key to my survival. As the due date approached, my mind oscillated between hope and fear. Every kick from the babies was a reminder that life was moving forward, regardless of the chaos that had preceded it. I began to prepare not only for their arrival but for the inevitable confrontations that would come with revealing the full truth. I decided that honesty was the only way to regain control. If I wanted to rebuild my life, I had to face the past head-on. I started writing letters, to Mark, to Lily, and even to myself, expressing feelings I had buried deep inside. It was cathartic, painful, but necessary. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, I realized how much I had changed. The woman who had once been naive and trusting was now cautious but unbreakable. I was no longer a victim but a survivor with a story worth telling. The births came faster than I expected. 2 beautiful, healthy babies who embodied both pain and promise. Holding them in my arms, I felt a fierce protective instinct awaken, pushing away the ghosts of betrayal. Yet with new life came new challenges. I knew that eventually Mark and Lily would have to be confronted with the reality that their choices had irrevocably altered all our lives. But for now, I focused on healing, on building a future for my children that was free from deceit. And in that fragile peace, I found a sliver of hope, a promise that no secret, no betrayal could ever truly define me. The weeks following the birth of my twins were a whirlwind, exhaustion mixed with moments of indescribable joy. Every time I looked into their tiny faces, I felt a surge of strength I didn't know I had. Those 2 little lives were mine to protect, mine to love fiercely, and mine to shape into a future different from the one my sister and husband had tried to steal from me. But the peace was fragile. Despite my determination to focus on my babies and myself, the past kept creeping in. Messages from Mark still came, desperate and pleading. Lily too sent texts filled with regret, wanting to reconcile. I read them but didn't respond. Not yet. I needed time. Time to heal, time to decide what I wanted, and who I wanted to be without their shadows hanging over me. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the loneliness. Betrayal isolates you, cuts you off from the people you once trusted most. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of silence, the only sound my baby's soft breathing beside me in the quiet of the night. There were nights when I doubted myself, wondered if I was strong enough to raise these children alone, without the family I thought I had. The idea of becoming a single mother was terrifying. But then I would look at my babies, their tiny hands curling around my fingers, and I knew I had to keep going. For them. Slowly I started to rebuild. I reached out to old friends, people who had always been there but had been pushed aside by the life I once led. They welcomed me back with open arms, no judgment, only support. I started therapy to process everything, to unburden the weight of betrayal and find a way to forgive, not for Mark or Lily but for myself. One afternoon, while sorting through baby clothes, I found a photo album from my childhood. Pictures of me and Lily laughing, playing, growing up as sisters. The memories hit me hard, what we had lost, what we might never regain. But they also reminded me of the bond that once existed, fragile but real. I didn't know if Lily and I would ever repair our relationship. Maybe we would, maybe we wouldn't. But I was learning that sometimes love isn't enough. That betrayal can change people in ways that time alone can't heal. Then came the day I decided to tell the world my story. It wasn't easy. I spent hours drafting a letter, choosing my words carefully. I wanted people to understand the complexity of pain and resilience, to see beyond the surface of betrayal and know that even shattered lives could be rebuilt. I shared it on social media, and the response surprised me. Messages of support, stories of others who had faced similar betrayals, and encouragement that I wasn't alone. That outpouring of empathy gave me courage. It reminded me that secrets have power only as long as they remain hidden. By revealing my truth, I took back control of my narrative. Mark and Lily saw the post. Their silence after that was deafening. I wasn't sure what the future held for any of us, but I was certain of one thing. I was no longer defined by their choices. I was defined by my strength, my courage, and the love I held for my children. The road ahead was uncertain and likely filled with pain, but it was mine to walk. And this time I would walk it on my own terms. The days following my public revelation were a mix of relief and new challenges. Sharing my story had lifted a weight I didn't realize I was carrying, but it also opened doors I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. Mark's silence was unsettling, and Lily's absence left a hollow space where our sisterhood used to be. But I found strength in the unexpected. Messages from strangers who had faced similar betrayals, friends reaching out with empathy, and most of all, my baby's innocent faces, reminding me why I needed to keep going. One afternoon, I received a letter. It was from Lily. Her handwriting shaky, the words raw and honest. She apologized, not just for the affair but for everything she'd taken from me. She wrote about guilt, regret, and the hope for forgiveness someday. I read the letter several times, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. Part of me wanted to hold on to the pain, to keep the door closed forever. But another part wondered if forgiveness was a path I needed to take, not for her but for myself. Mark eventually reached out too. This time his words were different, less desperate and more reflective. He admitted his mistakes, acknowledged the hurt he caused, and expressed a desire to make amends. But I wasn't ready to open that door. The truth was, trust once broken is hard to rebuild. Actions speak louder than words, and I needed to see more than apologies. I needed to see change. In the meantime, I focused on my children and myself. Every smile from them was a victory, every milestone a reminder that life could move forward. I went back to work part-time, surrounding myself with people who believed in me, who helped me see beyond the pain. There were moments of loneliness, nights when tears came without warning. But I learned to sit with the pain, to let it wash over me without letting it drown me. Slowly I was becoming whole again. And though the scars from betrayal would always remain, they no longer defined me. They were part of my story, yes, but they were not the end. Healing isn't linear. I learned that the hard way. Some days I felt like I was moving forward, strong, confident, ready to take on whatever came next. Other days, the weight of everything pressed down on me so heavily I couldn't breathe. I'd catch myself staring blankly at the wall, heart aching, haunted by memories I wished I could erase. But the babies, they were my anchor. Their small hands, their trusting eyes, reminded me that life was still beautiful, even if it was messy and painful. I wanted to give them a world where love was real, where secrets didn't tear families apart. Work helped too. I slowly eased back into my publishing career, taking on projects that inspired me. Writing became a refuge, a way to process everything and turn my pain into something meaningful. People reached out after reading my story, telling me how brave I was. Their words gave me strength on days when I felt weak. Lily remained a complex chapter in my life. Our communication was sporadic, filled with long silences and cautious exchanges. Forgiveness wasn't something I could force. It had to come naturally or not at all. Some wounds take time to heal, and I was learning patience not just with others but with myself. Mark's presence faded gradually. We negotiated the terms of separation quietly and respectfully, with lawyers and boundaries clearly drawn. The man I once loved had become a stranger shaped by his choices, and I was learning to live without him. One afternoon, as I sat in the park watching my twins play, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The sun warmed my face, and for the first time in a long while I smiled without pain or regret. I realized I was more than my past, more than the betrayals and secrets. I was a mother, a woman reborn through fire, ready to write the next chapters of my life. That secret I had held, the one that could have destroyed me, had become the key to my freedom. It forced me to confront my pain, to rise above it, and to embrace a future defined by resilience and hope. And as I watched my children laugh, chasing each other beneath the wide-open sky, I knew one thing for certain. No matter what had happened, no matter what would come, I was ready. Ready to live, to love, and to be whole again. Even as the days grew lighter, shadows lingered, reminders that healing is never truly complete. I found myself flinching at unexpected moments. A song on the radio, a familiar scent, a place we once visited as a family. The ghosts of betrayal whispered in quiet corners, testing my resolve. But I had learned to face them without fear, armed with the knowledge that I was no longer powerless. Rebuilding trust, especially with myself, was the hardest part. I spent hours reflecting on the past, not to dwell but to understand. Why had I stayed so long? What had I overlooked? These questions weren't easy to answer, but they helped me grow. I realized that love is complicated, sometimes messy, and often doesn't come with guarantees. But love for myself, that was something I could nurture and protect. With the twins growing stronger each day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Every milestone they reached, first smile, first step, first word, was a victory not just for them but for me. They were living proof that life could bloom anew, even from the harshest winters. Work became more than a job. It became a mission. I began writing openly about my experiences, hoping my story could be a beacon for others facing similar betrayals. The messages I received were overwhelming. Stories of survival, of forgiveness, of finding light in darkness. Together we formed a quiet community of strength and hope. Occasionally Lily reached out. Our conversations were tentative, fragile bridges stretched over a river of pain. We spoke cautiously, each word weighted with past wounds. Forgiveness remained distant, but the door to understanding was ajar. I didn't know if we'd ever fully heal, but I was willing to try, for both our sakes. Mark's presence in my life was minimal, confined to legal proceedings and logistics. There was no reconciliation, only acceptance. I let go of the man he had been and embraced the woman I was becoming. One evening, after putting the twins to sleep, I sat by the window watching the stars. I whispered a promise to myself, to keep moving forward, to honor my journey, and to cherish the love I now held. The past had shaped me, but it did not define me. I was Carla Bennett, survivor, mother, and woman reborn. And with that, I closed the chapter on betrayal and opened a new one filled with hope, courage, and endless possibility. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day I felt myself growing stronger, not just physically from carrying my twins, but emotionally and mentally from facing the wreckage of my past and choosing to rebuild. The betrayal from Mark and Lily had left scars that didn't simply vanish overnight, but I was learning to live alongside them, carrying them not as burdens, but as reminders of my resilience. There were mornings when I woke up feeling overwhelmed, the weight of loneliness pressing on my chest like a heavy stone. Those moments were brutal. I longed for the family I thought I had, the life I'd imagined, and yet I refused to let those losses define me. Instead, I focused on what I did have: my health, my babies growing inside me, and a future waiting to be shaped by my own hands. The secret I carried was still mine alone. I hadn't shared the truth about the twins' fathers. Not with Mark, not with Lily, not with anyone. It was my armor, my quiet power that gave me control over a world that had tried to spiral out of control. That secret was both a blessing and a curse. Sometimes, in the dead of night, it felt like a weight I couldn't carry any longer. Other times, it was the light that kept me moving forward. That I spent hours talking to myself in the mirror, reminding myself that I was worthy of love, respect, and happiness. Those affirmations were hard-won but necessary. After all, how could I expect others to believe in me if I didn't believe in myself first? My therapist became my confidant, guiding me through the maze of emotions I couldn't navigate alone. I learned to grieve, not just for the betrayal but for the sisterhood lost, for the marriage broken, for the dreams shattered. Grieving wasn't about giving up. It was about making space for new beginnings. Work became a sanctuary. Returning to publishing gave me a sense of normalcy and purpose. I immersed myself in projects that inspired me, surrounded myself with colleagues who treated me with kindness and respect. Slowly, I reclaimed pieces of myself that had been buried beneath layers of pain and doubt. I also began to write more openly, blog posts, essays, letters, sharing parts of my story to connect with others who had felt the sting of betrayal and the pain of secrets. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people around the world, sharing their own stories, offering support and thanking me for my courage. It was humbling and empowering, reminding me that no one is truly alone in their struggles. Despite this progress, the relationship with Lily remained fragile. Our exchanges were cautious, like stepping on thin ice. I didn't know if we would ever truly heal, but I was open to the possibility. Maybe one day forgiveness would come, not for her sake but for mine. Mark's shadow faded gradually. The legal battles and separation proceedings were draining but necessary. I realized that the man I once loved had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Holding on to him was holding on to pain. Letting go was the only way to move forward. One afternoon, as I organized the nursery, I found a forgotten photo album filled with pictures of Lily and me from childhood. Smiling, carefree, innocent. Tears blurred my vision as I traced our younger selves, memories flooding back of a bond that once felt unbreakable. The loss stung deeply, but it also reminded me that even broken relationships leave behind pieces of beauty and love. Now, as I sit here waiting for the day my twins will arrive, I am filled with a quiet hope. The journey ahead will be challenging, but I am ready. Ready to face the unknown, to embrace the chaos and joy of motherhood, to build a life on my own terms. Because I have learned that betrayal can shatter a life, but it can also give birth to strength. Secrets can destroy, but they can also free. And the most important truth I've discovered is this: no matter what the past holds, the future is mine to write. As the months passed, my body changed in ways both beautiful and overwhelming. The weight of carrying my twins was a constant reminder of the life blossoming inside me, even as my heart still bore the wounds of betrayal. Each doctor's appointment brought both reassurance and anxiety. I listened intently to the tiny heartbeats, the rhythmic sound like a lifeline connecting me to hope. Preparing for motherhood was daunting. I read every book, joined every online forum, and decorated the nursery with the care of someone building a sanctuary. This room, filled with soft blankets, tiny clothes, and lullabies, was a symbol of new beginnings, a place untouched by the scars of my past. Despite the growing life within, I still wrestled with waves of loneliness. The silence in my apartment sometimes felt like a physical thing, pressing in on me during the long nights when the babies kicked and I was wide awake. Sometimes I reached for my phone, scrolling through messages from Mark and Lily, weighing the possibility of reconciliation against the risk of reopening old wounds. But I knew some bridges might never be rebuilt. The fractures ran too deep. And while forgiveness was a beautiful ideal, it wasn't something I could rush or force. Healing was mine to navigate on my own terms. One afternoon, an unexpected visitor knocked on my door. It was my mother. She hadn't seen me since everything had come to light. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also with a quiet strength I hadn't expected. She sat with me for hours, listening without judgment as I recounted the story of betrayal, secrets, and resilience. For the first time in a long while, I felt the comfort of family, not the broken pieces but the possibility of mending. With her support, I felt a flicker of hope, that maybe, despite everything, love could survive even the darkest betrayals. The twins' arrival was imminent, and as I prepared to bring them into this world, I realized something important. My story wasn't just about pain or loss. It was about survival, about rising from ashes, about the strength found in vulnerability. And with that realization, I knew I was ready, not just to be a mother but to reclaim my life in every way. The day the twins were born was a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, relief, joy, and exhaustion all tangled together in a messy, beautiful storm. Holding them for the first time, their tiny bodies curled against mine, I felt a surge of love so powerful it seemed to erase the pain, even if just for a moment. They were perfect, Two little miracles who represented everything I had fought for and everything I was still fighting to protect. The hospital room was quiet except for their soft breaths and the distant hum of machines. Mark was nowhere to be found. By then, he had accepted that our paths had irrevocably diverged. Lily hadn't reached out, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to face her yet. All that mattered was these two new lives in my arms, and the future I was determined to build for them. Motherhood was more challenging than I had imagined. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the constant worry about doing everything right could overwhelm even the strongest person. But with every smile, every grasp of my finger, I found strength I didn't know I had. They needed me and I needed them. In the quiet moments, I allowed myself to dream again, about the kind of life I wanted for my children, free from the shadows of betrayal and lies. I pictured a home filled with laughter, trust, and unconditional love, a place where secrets had no power. I also began to think about forgiveness, not as a gift to those who hurt me but as a gift to myself. Forgiving Mark and Lily wouldn't erase the past, but it would free me from carrying their burdens. It was a process, slow and uneven, but one I was willing to embark on. Friends and family rallied around me, their support a balm to my weary soul. Each kind word, each helping hand, reminded me I wasn't alone. My journey was far from over, but I had a new tribe now. People who saw me, believed in me, and lifted me when I faltered. As the days turned into weeks, I found peace in the small moments. The softness of my baby's skin, the warmth of sunlight through the nursery window, the steady rhythm of life moving forward. I was no longer defined by betrayal or secrets but by resilience, love, and hope. And in that quiet strength, I discovered the woman I was always meant to be. The journey into motherhood was unlike anything I had imagined. More beautiful, more difficult, and more transformative than I ever could have anticipated. Each day brought new challenges, new lessons, and new moments of profound love. My twins, fragile yet fierce, became the center of my universe, their needs dictating my every move. Sleepless nights blurred into one another, feedings and diaper changes became rhythmic rituals, and every tiny milestone, a smile, a coo, a grasp of my finger, felt like a victory against all the odds. Yet amidst the chaos and exhaustion, I found a surprising clarity. The betrayals that had once threatened to shatter my world were still there, shadows lurking at the edges of my consciousness, but they no longer held the power to control me. I was reclaiming my life, piece by piece, forging a new identity not defined by pain but by resilience. The secret I had carried for so long, the truth about twins' fathers, remained mine alone. It was a silent thread weaving through my days, a reminder of the complexity of love and the messy, unpredictable paths it takes. I hadn't shared this part of my story with anyone, not even the closest friends who had stood by me through the storm. It was my sacred space, something I needed to hold on to as I rebuilt my life. Forgiveness, I realized, was a journey, not a destination. I was learning to forgive not just Mark and Lily but also myself. For the moments I had doubted, for the times I had stayed silent, for the parts of me that felt broken. Forgiving didn't mean forgetting. It meant freeing myself from the chains of anger and resentment. My relationship with Lily was still fragile, punctuated by tentative conversations and guarded glances. The wounds ran deep, and while time had softened some edges, the path to healing was long and uncertain. I was open to whatever the future held, but I refused to rush or force what wasn't ready. Mark's presence in my life had all but vanished. Our interactions were limited to the legal necessities surrounding our separation, each encounter a stark reminder of what had been lost. I mourned the man I thought I knew, but I accepted that sometimes people reveal their true selves only when the mask falls away. One afternoon, while sitting in the nursery watching my twins sleep, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Despite everything, I had been given a second chance. A chance to write my own story, to build a life rooted in truth and love. The scars of betrayal were part of me, but they were no longer my identity. I began to write again, pouring my heart into words that once felt too painful to express. My blog became a sanctuary, a place where I could share my journey and connect with others who had faced their own storms. The messages I received from strangers and friends alike reminded me that pain, while isolating, also had the power to unite. The community I found gave me strength, a reminder that none of us are truly alone. Together, we navigated the complexities of healing, forgiveness, and hope. I realized that vulnerability was not weakness but courage, the courage to face the past and step boldly into the future. As the twins grew stronger, so did I. Every challenge met, every fear overcome, was a testament to the resilience that had carried me through the darkest times. I was no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by who I had become. And as I watched my children play in the soft afternoon light, I knew that the story of betrayal was only one chapter. The chapters yet to be written were filled with possibility, hope, love, and a strength I never knew I possessed. This was my new beginning. Life after betrayal felt like walking through a fog, uncertain, heavy, but gradually lifting as I learned to trust myself again. Each day was a battle between past wounds and the hope of new beginnings. There were moments when the pain threatened to consume me, yet the love for my twins anchored me firmly in the present. Their innocent eyes and tiny hands reminded me that despite everything, life still held beauty and purpose. Rebuilding trust was not just about others, it was about believing in myself. I spent countless hours reflecting on my choices, the red flags I had missed, and the boundaries I needed to set. It wasn't easy to accept that sometimes, love isn't enough to save a relationship. But accepting that truth freed me to focus on what mattered: my healing and the future I was determined to create. I continued writing, using words as therapy and a bridge to connect with others who shared similar pain. The stories I heard in response were powerful. Testimonies of resilience, forgiveness, and the unyielding strength of the human spirit. Through these connections, I realized my story was bigger than betrayal. It was about survival, growth, and hope. Lily and I remained distant, our conversations cautious and tentative. The sister I once knew felt like a stranger, yet a part of me longed to believe that healing was possible. Forgiveness was a journey we both had to navigate, and I wasn't in a hurry to force it. Mark's absence was a painful void but also a necessary space for me to reclaim my identity. Legal matters became the boundary between us, and I held firm to the understanding that some wounds require distance to heal. As the twins grew, so did my confidence and sense of purpose. Motherhood reshaped me in profound ways, teaching me patience, unconditional love, and the power of vulnerability. I was no longer defined by the betrayal that had once consumed me but by the strength I discovered within. One evening, while rocking my babies to sleep, I whispered a promise to myself: to live fully, love deeply, and never let the shadows of the past dictate my future. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, with courage, grace, and hope. The early morning light filtered softly through the curtains, casting gentle shadows across the nursery where my twins slept peacefully. As I sat in the rocking chair, the quiet hum of the city outside barely audible, I felt a rare moment of calm, a stillness that had eluded me for so long. It was in these moments, cradling my babies close, that the weight of betrayal seemed to lessen, replaced by an overwhelming sense of purpose and love. The journey here had been anything but smooth. Betrayal wasn't a single event. It was a slow unraveling, a series of moments that chipped away at the foundation of everything I thought I knew. Mark's lies, Lily's deceit. They weren't just betrayals of trust but betrayals of the very family I had hoped to build. The pain cut deep, but it also forced me to confront who I was, what I wanted, and how I would rebuild my life from the ruins. In the weeks following the birth of my twins, I found myself navigating a new identity, not just as a mother but as a woman redefining herself beyond the scars. Each day was filled with the small, beautiful challenges of motherhood: sleepless nights, first smiles, and the delicate dance of balancing vulnerability with strength. The twins were my light, their tiny hands gripping mine, reminding me that even in darkness, hope could flourish. Yet the past was never far. Legal battles with Mark were exhausting and cold, a stark reminder of what had been lost. His absence was palpable yet necessary. I learned that sometimes love is not enough, and that self-respect often demands difficult choices. Walking away was the hardest decision, but it was also the most liberating. Lily's presence was more complicated. Our sporadic conversations carried the weight of years, filled with regret and the fragile possibility of reconciliation. Forgiveness was not immediate, nor was it guaranteed, but the door remained slightly ajar, waiting for time and healing to do their work. Through therapy and writing, I discovered a well of strength within myself that I hadn't known existed. Pouring my story into words became catharsis, transforming pain into power. The community that embraced my vulnerability was a lifeline, reminding me that I was not alone in my struggle. Together we forged paths toward healing, forgiveness, and hope. Motherhood taught me patience, not just with my children but with myself. I learned to accept imperfection, to embrace setbacks, and to find beauty in resilience. The twins' laughter became a soundtrack to my healing, a daily reminder that life continues, even after heartbreak. As I looked toward the future, I understood that my story was still being written. The chapters of betrayal and loss were painful, but they were not the end. They were the foundation upon which I would build a life defined by courage, love, and the unyielding determination to rise. In the quiet nursery, holding my children close, I whispered a promise, not just to them but to myself, to keep moving forward, to seek joy amidst the pain, and to never forget the strength that had carried me through the darkest nights. Because I was more than a victim. I was Carla Bennett, survivor, mother, and woman reborn. The months that followed brought unexpected moments of growth and reflection. Each day was a balancing act between caring for my twins and tending to the wounds that betrayal had left behind. Yet with every smile, every first word, every tiny milestone, I found reasons to keep moving forward. They were the purest reminder that life doesn't wait for us to be ready. It demands we keep going no matter the pain. Rebuilding my sense of self was a slow, sometimes painful process. I grappled with questions I hadn't dared to ask before. Why did I stay so long? What parts of me allowed the betrayal to happen? It was difficult to face those truths, but I knew that understanding them was the first step toward healing. Work became a refuge. Returning to the publishing world gave me purpose beyond motherhood and pain. I found comfort in routine, in deadlines and creative challenges. Writing my story publicly was terrifying but liberating. The response was overwhelming. Messages of empathy, encouragement, and shared experiences flooded my inbox. It reminded me that betrayal was not isolated and healing was possible. My relationship with Lily remained fragile. We tried to bridge the gap, but the trust we lost couldn't be restored overnight. Sometimes we shared memories and other times we sat in silence, acknowledging the distance between us. Forgiveness was a journey, not a destination, and I was learning to be patient. Mark was a shadow of the past. Our legal separation was finalized, but the emotional separation was already complete. I mourned the loss of the man I thought I loved but accepted that some endings were necessary for new beginnings. Motherhood reshaped me in ways I never expected. It taught me vulnerability and strength, patience and courage. The twins, with their innocent eyes and trusting hands, were constant reminders of hope and renewal. One quiet evening as I rocked them to sleep, I felt a deep sense of peace. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to walk it, on my own terms, with open heart and fierce determination. Because I was more than the betrayals I endured. I was a woman reborn, a mother fiercely protective, and a survivor with a story worth telling. Life was no longer dictated by the betrayals that once consumed me. Instead, it became a testament to resilience and hope. Each day with my twins was a blessing, a chance to rewrite my story, not as a victim but as a woman who had endured and emerged stronger. Their laughter filled the spaces where pain had once lived, and their smiles reminded me of the beauty still left in the world. Despite the scars left by Mark and Lily, I chose to focus on what I could control: my healing, my children, and my future. The secret I had carried for so long remained mine alone, a quiet force that fueled my determination. I hadn't yet shared it with anyone, not even those closest to me. It was a boundary I set to protect myself and my babies. Rebuilding trust took time, and sometimes I doubted if it was possible. But with each step forward, I learned to believe again. In myself, in the possibility of forgiveness, and in the power of new beginnings. My writing connected me to a community of survivors who understood the complexities of pain and healing. Their stories gave me strength, and I hoped mine would do the same for others. Lily and I maintained a cautious distance, our interactions limited but respectful. I didn't know if we would ever truly heal, but I was willing to keep the door open. Forgiveness was a choice, and for now I was choosing to heal on my own terms. Mark's absence was a constant reminder of loss, but also of freedom. The end of our marriage marked the beginning of my reclaiming my life. Legal matters were settled, boundaries established, and I embraced the solitude that allowed me to grow. Motherhood taught me patience and grace. The twins' growth was a daily miracle, their presence a balm to my soul. They were the reason I continued to fight, to dream, and to believe in the possibility of happiness. One evening as I tucked them into bed, I whispered a promise: to protect them, to love them unconditionally, and to show them the strength that had carried me through. My story was still unfolding, and while the past would always be a part of me, it no longer defined who I was. I was Carla Bennett, survivor, mother, and woman reborn. The days rolled on, each blending into the next with the steady rhythm of motherhood and healing. I often found myself reflecting on how far I'd come, how the betrayal that once felt like a crushing weight had slowly transformed into a quiet strength within me. The secret I'd carried, the complexity of my twins' parentage, remained closely guarded. It was a private truth that shaped my resolve and reminded me that some parts of our story are meant only for ourselves, at least for now. Rebuilding trust was a slow, uneven journey. I found myself learning to trust not just others but, more importantly, myself. For years, I had allowed the actions of Mark and Lily to define my worth. But as I nurtured my children, returned to work, and shared pieces of my story with a growing community of supporters, I discovered a new sense of self, one forged in resilience and hope. Writing became a powerful tool in this transformation. Through my blog and personal essays, I connected with others who had faced betrayal and heartbreak. Their stories mirrored my own in many ways, stories of pain, forgiveness, and ultimately growth. This exchange of courage and vulnerability was healing in itself, reminding me that even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone. The relationship with Lily remained complicated. We navigated tentative conversations, sharing memories but often sidestepping the deeper wounds. Forgiveness wasn't a destination but a path we both had to choose, and I was patient with the process. Some days I allowed myself to hope that one day we might rebuild the sisterhood we lost. Other days I accepted that some wounds might never fully heal. Mark's absence was a constant reminder of loss but also a symbol of freedom. The legal separation was finalized, setting clear boundaries that helped me reclaim my life. I mourned the man I once loved but understood that holding on to what was broken only prolonged the pain. Motherhood reshaped me in profound ways. The twins, with their innocent eyes and trusting hands, taught me patience, unconditional love, and the courage to be vulnerable. Each milestone they reached was a triumph not just for them but for me, a testament to survival and hope. One quiet evening as I rocked my babies to sleep, I whispered a promise to myself: to live fully, to love deeply, and to never allow the shadows of the past to dictate my future. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to walk, with strength, grace, and hope. I was no longer defined by betrayal but by the woman I had become, Carla Bennett, survivor, mother, and woman reborn. Life had a way of testing me, not with grand gestures but through the subtle persistence of everyday challenges. Raising twins on my own, balancing work and motherhood, and navigating the emotional aftermath of betrayal demanded more strength than I ever imagined I possessed. Yet each day brought small victories, smiles, laughter, and quiet moments of connection that fueled my determination to keep moving forward. I continued to pour my heart into writing, using words as a means to process pain and share hope. My blog became a sanctuary where I could be honest and raw, and the responses I received reminded me of the power of vulnerability. Strangers and friends alike shared their stories, creating a community bound by resilience and mutual support. It was healing to know I was not alone, and my story inspired others to face their own struggles. The tentative relationship with Lily evolved slowly. We exchanged messages filled with cautious apologies and tentative hopes for reconciliation. Some days it felt like we were bridging the gap, and on others the distance felt insurmountable. Forgiveness was not a straight path but a winding road, and I chose to walk it at my own pace. Mark remained distant, a ghost from the past whose presence was limited to legal proceedings and the boundaries we had set. I grieved the loss of the life I once envisioned but embraced the freedom that came with letting go. The space between us allowed me to focus on healing and growth without the weight of old wounds pulling me back. Motherhood deepened my understanding of love and resilience. The twins were my greatest teachers, their innocence and trust pushing me to be stronger and more compassionate. Each milestone they achieved was a celebration of survival and a testament to the new life we were building together. One evening as I watched them sleep, I felt a profound sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with courage and grace. My past no longer defined me. It had shaped me into the woman I was becoming. Carla Bennett, survivor, mother, and woman reborn. The final chapter of this journey was not marked by dramatic revelations or sweeping changes, but by the quiet, steady rhythm of healing and growth. Over time, I learned that survival wasn't about erasing the past, but about embracing it as part of my story, flaws, scars, and all, and moving forward with a heart open to hope and love. Motherhood had transformed me in ways I could never have anticipated. The twins, once fragile and dependent, were now little individuals filled with curiosity, laughter, and boundless energy. Watching them grow was like witnessing a miracle unfolding every day, a reminder that even after the deepest pain, life could renew itself with incredible beauty. The secret I had held on to, the truth about their fathers, remained my own. It was a boundary I chose to protect, a quiet strength that empowered me. In time, I realized that some truths don't need to be shared to be powerful. Sometimes they are the foundation of personal healing and resilience. My relationship with Lily had softened over the years. Though the sisterhood we once shared would never fully return, we had found a fragile peace, a respect born from shared history and the recognition of each other's pain. Forgiveness, I came to understand, was not a single act but an ongoing process, one that required patience and empathy from both sides. Mark's absence was a silent void, a space that once echoed with love and betrayal but now was filled with quiet acceptance. I no longer mourned the man I thought he was but celebrated the woman I had become in his absence. The boundaries we set were firm, allowing me to reclaim my identity and focus on what truly mattered. As I reflected on my journey, I understood that strength wasn't about never falling, it was about rising every time I did. Each tear shed, each night spent in doubt, each moment of fear had contributed to the woman I was now. Resilient, compassionate, and fiercely loving. Writing had become more than a tool for healing. It was a gift I shared with the world. Through my words, I connected with countless others who had faced betrayal, loss, and hardship. Together, we formed a community of survivors. People who refused to be defined by pain and chose instead to find light in the darkness. The life I had built was imperfect but mine. It was a testament to courage and the power of choice. I was no longer a prisoner of my past but the author of my future. One quiet evening, as the sun set over the city skyline, I sat with my twins nestled beside me. The soft glow of the fading light cast a warm embrace over us. I whispered a promise, not just to them but to myself, to live fully, love deeply, and continue to grow. Because I was Carla Bennett, survivor, mother, and woman reborn. And this was only the beginning.